The pandemic has thrown a monkey wrench into so many of the plans that we all had for things we wanted to accomplish in our companies over the past 12 to 18 months. Among many other things, you may have been getting ready to roll out your fundamentals, and now you're wondering, should we just wait till people can safely be together so we can do this in person? Or should we try to do it virtually? As you might guess, there's no right answer here. It depends on a whole variety of issues. Our goal in this video is to bring more clarity to the pluses and minuses of different approaches so that you can make the best decision for your company. So that we're all using the same terms. The rollout is the name that we use for the event where your fundamentals get introduced to your entire workforce. The rollout is a critical part of success, and that's why examining different options definitely deserves careful consideration. There's an analogy that we often use for describing the importance of the rollout. I think of it like preparing the soil. If we take really high-quality seeds and we just throw them on the ground, they're not likely to grow. But if we prepare the soil properly, and then we plant the seeds and we water them, they're far more likely to thrive. The same is true of our fundamentals. We could write the greatest set of fundamentals, and if we just dump it on people and say, okay, next week's week number 1, they're not likely to go very far. We have to get people fully engaged and excited to start practicing, and the rollout is how you accomplish that. And that's why it's so important to do it right. As we look at the options, let me first say that in most cases, the best and the most effective way to do a rollout is in person. There's a dynamic that happens when people are physically together, an energy that's present that's just hard to replicate on a Zoom call. That being said, it's just not always possible or even logistically feasible, whether that's because of the pandemic or maybe it's just because your people are spread out over lots of smaller locations or because it's just too expensive to bring them all together. In these cases, doing a virtual rollout may be the best option that's available. In evaluating whether or not to do your rollout virtually, the first thing that I would assure you is that it can absolutely be done very effectively and with a high degree of engagement. We've done hundreds of these sessions, and we've learned the best practices to make them great. By way of comparison, if an in-person rollout is, let's say, a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale in terms of its effectiveness, a virtual rollout is probably, I would call it an 8.5. It's not the same, but it's not like it's a 4 or a 5. It's pretty darn good. By now, everybody's pretty familiar with virtual meetings, so it won't feel strange. Zoom allows us to use breakout groups and polling, so we can do a lot of things to make it feel very intimate and engaging. We can call on people to make sure that everybody participates, and people can raise their hands and chat, and we can add plenty of comments. Interestingly, virtual rollouts actually offer a few advantages over in-person ones. First, it's easier to mix and match people from different offices since their location is largely irrelevant. Second, it's more efficient when you've got some smaller offices. It may not be cost effective to do a physical rollout for a location that only has 5 or 10 people. But doing it virtually, hey, that's pretty easy. Third, if you have a number of smaller offices, you don't have to close down a location to do the rollout. You can take a couple of people at a time and just spread them throughout all the various virtual rollout sessions. Fourth, you save on travel expenses. Depending upon how many locations you have, that could be pretty significant. And last but not least, during the pandemic, there's the safety issue. It just may not yet be safe for people to be gathering in large groups. Virtual rollouts obviously eliminate that concern. As you can see, doing rollouts virtually can be pretty effective, and it can even have a number of advantages over doing them in person. So, what factors should you consider as you think about what will be the best option for your organization? Number 1, do most of your people have reasonable access to a computer with a camera? If you're a white-collar industry, they almost certainly do. If you're in a manufacturing kind of environment, there may be quite a few who don't have access. And so you might be better off just waiting until we can do it in person. And by the way, having a bunch of people sitting around one computer or looking at a big screen, it doesn't really work well. 2, Is there a timing issue to be concerned? If there are compelling reasons to do this sooner rather than later, it may be better to just get going with a virtual rollout. For example, you're about to do an acquisition and you want to make sure that the new people get properly integrated into your culture. Or maybe getting everybody on the same page is going to have a big impact on other initiatives you have going on. In these cases, I'd suggest doing it virtually. When the pandemic began, most of us shifted into survival mode, and we put off all our major projects, figuring, hey, this was all going to pass soon. Who would have guessed that most of our employees would be working remotely, some maybe even permanently, and that this crazy time would last more than a year? I sure didn't think so, but here we are. To varying degrees, we've all adapted, and we're finding new ways to get done the important things that we need to accomplish to be successful. Doing your rollout virtually is just another example of one of those adaptations. It's certainly something to consider.